in the frigid expanse of the Arctic Ocean, where winter darkness can stretch for weeks and ice clogs the shipping lanes. A lifeline connected Britain and the Soviet Union, a lifeline fraught with peril, bravery, and relentless determination. It was August 1941, mere weeks after Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union, and Britain recognized that victory in Europe required not only the survival of its own forces but the endurance of its new ally on the Eastern Front. The Arctic convoys were born, a network of supply ships braving the harshest seas on Earth, carrying vital munitions, food, tanks, and raw materials, essential for the survival of a nation fighting for its life. Yet, this lifeline was no ordinary journey. The Arctic did not forgive mistakes. Ships creaked and groaned under the assault of icy gales, their steel decks coated with frost that could snap bones. Snowstorms blinded navigators and masked the presence of lurking dangers beneath the waves. The sailors knew the consequences of missteps. One slip overboard, and the icy waters would claim a life in seconds. Despite this, the crews pressed on, driven by a shared sense of purpose, by the knowledge that every barrel of fuel, every crate of ammunition, could alter the course of the war. Across this treacherous corridor sailed convoys like JW55B, their hulls cutting through churning gray seas while dark clouds hung low, threatening snow and ice. On board, men labored under grueling conditions, their faces raw from biting winds, their hands stiff from cold. In the mess holes, hot tea was rationed, stories of home fleeting, but morale depended on camaraderie and discipline. Yet, no matter how severe the weather, the shadow of the Kriegsmarine loomed. Intelligence reports hinted at a formidable threat. The German battleship Scharnhorst, a fast and deadly predator of the seas, poised to intercept convoys and turn these lifelines into graveyards. The stakes could not have been higher. The loss of even a single convoy could cripple the Soviet war effort and tip the scales on the Eastern Front. British Admiralty strategists understood this, and their countermeasures were as sophisticated as they were dangerous. Every convoy was carefully planned, every route chosen with consideration of ice patterns, daylight hours, and the lurking German fleet. And yet, the sheer unpredictability of the Arctic, the shifting ice, the storms, the unknown movements of the enemy made certainty impossible. It was on one particularly bitter December in 1943 that destiny brought these elements together in a drama of courage and cunning. HMS Belfast, a modern light cruiser armed with 12 6-inch guns and state-of-the-art radar equipment, was stationed in Murmansk with Vice Admiral Robert Burnett and his staff. The convoy was ready to depart, carrying supplies that would fortify Soviet troops against German advances. Meanwhile, British intelligence had intercepted German communications suggesting that Scharnhorst, accompanied by 5 destroyers, had left Altenfjord in Norway and was heading toward the convoy's path. The trap was being set in Arctic chess game where lives, strategy, and steel would collide. Click the subscribe button and like the video. It helps more people see this incredible story of courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Vice Admiral Burnett faced a test of nerve unlike any other. Should he advance immediately to intercept Scharnhorst or wait, using patience and calculated strategy to draw the German battleship into a deadly trap? The Arctic was vast, but it was also unforgiving, and every decision carried monumental risk. For the sailors, there was no escape from the tension. Decks slick with ice, they peered through blizzards at distant shadows, never knowing if the next flash on the horizon was an enemy vessel, a drifting iceberg, or the first sign of a storm that could engulf them all. The convoys themselves were more than mere supply ships. They were symbols. A British ship might carry tanks, another medical supplies, another fuel and ammunition. Each ship's survival mattered. And yet, the Germans were determined, their own orders clear. Scharnhorst must strike, must inflict maximum damage. The balance of patience versus aggression, strategy versus instinct, played out silently in the Arctic expanse, where radar pings and icy winds were the only heralds of an approaching battle. As December 26th approached, the tension aboard HMS Belfast was almost palpable. Sailors adjusted radar antennas, polished gun barrels, and checked munitions. Officers pored over maps and contingency plans. The sea raged around them, waves taller than houses, wind lashing across decks that were slick with frost. The convoy's crews understood their role. Hold fast, protect the cargo, survive long enough for the Royal Navy to engage and, hopefully, destroy the German threat. Would Vice Admiral Burnett's fleet manage to lure the Scharnhorst into engagement without risking the convoy, or would the icy Arctic waters claim them first? Across the Arctic horizon, the first glimmers of dawn revealed a pale, gray light reflecting off the churning waves. HMS Belfast's radar screens flickered. A faint echo appeared. Scharnhorst was near, moving deliberately, almost as if testing the waters before the confrontation that would decide the fate of the convoy. Every officer aboard knew what this encounter meant. Lives, strategy, and the outcome of months of planning now hung by a thread. The Arctic convoys were more than just a military operation. They were a testament to human endurance. Men labored tirelessly, braving unimaginable hardships to keep supplies flowing. Every lookout, every gunner, every stoker played a critical role in what was about to unfold. And as the sun struggled to rise above the horizon, obscured by storms and smoke, the stage was set for a confrontation that would etch itself into naval history. The Battle of North Cape. Even as crews prepared for combat, rumors circulated among the men. Sightings of German submarines, floating icebergs large enough to crush a ship, and the ominous sound of distant guns from earlier skirmishes. Tension mingled with fear, but also with a fierce resolve. They knew that history would judge them not only by their courage, but by their ability to execute a plan with precision under conditions that would break ordinary men. And so, the Arctic night held its breath. The convoy, a fragile line of lifelines, pressed forward into the unknown. Every moment was a test of judgment and nerve. The British sailors knew that this mission, like so many before, would either become a legendary story of triumph or a cautionary tale of what the Arctic could take in return for ambition. Could these ships, battered by ice and gale, withstand the coming storm of steel, fire, and human courage? The answer would soon emerge in a clash that would decide the fate of the Arctic convoys and mark one of the most dramatic naval battles of the Second World War. The Arctic skies above the Norwegian Sea were a muted gray, the waves heaving like living beasts as the cold wind cut across HMS Belfast's. Vice Admiral Robert Burnett stood at the bridge, binoculars in hand, eyes scanning the horizon, aware that the fragile calm was deceptive. In his mind, he reviewed the intelligence reports that had set this deadly game in motion. Scharnhorst, Germany's pride and a ship that had eluded the Royal Navy for years, was on the move. Yet, Burnett knew that victory would not come from brute force. Alone it would require patience, cunning, and flawless execution. Burnett's plan was daring. He would not engage the German battleship immediately. Instead, the convoy would serve as bait, drawing Scharnhorst into a prearranged trap where superior British firepower could strike decisively. Every maneuver had been meticulously calculated, yet the Arctic was a wild card. Ice could delay ships. Storms could obscure radar, and Scharnhorst's captain, aware of British surveillance, might choose to evade rather than fight. The tension was a knife edge. The crew aboard Belfast moved with disciplined efficiency. Gunners cleaned their barrels, navigators double-checked bearings, and engineers ensured engines ran smoothly, despite the frost freezing every exposed surface. The atmosphere was tense, but focused. The men understood that even minor errors could have catastrophic consequences. Outside, the sea churned and spat ice, waves slamming against the hull as if challenging the ship to stay the course. Then came the first blip on the radar, a faint echo, distant yet unmistakable. Scharnhorst was approaching, moving with purpose through the icy expanse. Burnett's heart quickened not with fear, but with the awareness that the trap he had planned for months was now set to spring. He considered the risks. The German battleship was fast, armed with 9 11-inch guns, and had proven capable of outmaneuvering British cruisers before. Yet, Burnett knew that his strategy was sound. The Royal Navy had intelligence, positioning, and superior radar. Success required precision, patience, and nerves of steel. Would Burnett's decision to wait give the British an advantage? Or would the Scharnhorst slip past undetected, leaving the convoy exposed to annihilation? The hours dragged as both sides maneuvered across the icy waters. Burnett's orders were clear: maintain distance, shadow the enemy, and avoid direct engagement until reinforcements arrived. Every sailor felt the weight of the responsibility, aware that their actions or inaction could determine not just the outcome of the battle but the fate of thousands of lives dependent on the convoys. Safe passage. HMS Belfast was not alone in its vigil. Other ships in the convoy, though smaller and less powerful, kept their stations, eyes peeled for any sign of danger, ears straining against the wind for sounds of enemy engines. The Germans, aware of the risk, advanced cautiously. Captain Eric Bay of Scharnhorst was under orders from Berlin to strike the convoy at all costs, but the Arctic was a treacherous theater. The German crew had to contend with the same storms, ice, and near-zero temperatures as their British counterparts. Their guns were ready, but visibility was poor, and radar technology, still in its infancy compared to the British, limited their situational awareness. The tension was mutual. Both sides waited for the moment when patience would give way to action. Burnett made a crucial decision: delay engagement until HMS Duke of York, a battleship armed with massive 14-inch guns, could reach striking range. It was a gamble, but one he believed necessary to ensure a decisive victory. Communications with the Duke of York were maintained via encrypted radio channels, their success hinging on precise timing and coordination. Every minute counted, and every crew member understood the stakes. A single miscalculation could turn preparation into catastrophe. Could the British maintain their calculated patience under the pressure, or would the lure of battle drive one of the commanders to act prematurely, risking the convoy's destruction? Meanwhile, aboard Scharnhorst, tension mounted. Captain Bay had to decide whether to trust his intelligence or his instincts. He knew the British had learned from previous encounters and might anticipate aggressive maneuvers. He weighed the orders from Berlin against the Arctic's unpredictable conditions. Every decision fraught with peril. The vast, cold expanse of the sea became a battlefield not yet fought, where every choice could tip the balance between survival and destruction. Back on HMS Belfast, crew members worked tirelessly below decks to ensure the ship remained calm. Engineers monitored engines that groaned under the cold. Stokers fed coal to maintain steam pressure, and electricians safeguarded radar systems critical to detecting the enemy in the Arctic gloom. In the mess halls, sailors spoke in hushed tones, aware that rumors of Scharnhorst's approach traveled faster than the cold wind. The anticipation was almost unbearable. By midday, the first exchange of long-range signals occurred. Radar operators aboard Belfast tracked Scharnhorst's movements, reporting back to Burnett, whose calculations now dictated every turn of the ship. Tactical patience was essential. Engage too soon, and the battle could be lost. Wait too long and the Germans might slip past. Burnett balanced risk and opportunity as deftly as any chess master, each move calculated to draw the enemy into the trap. With Scharnhorst closing in and the Arctic weather deteriorating, could Burnett's carefully orchestrated strategy withstand the unpredictable chaos of battle, or would the Arctic claim victory before the fight even began? The hours stretched, the cold gnawed at hands and faces, but discipline held firm. Burnett's voice, calm but authoritative, directed every maneuver from the bridge. Officers relayed orders to gun crews, engineers, and lookouts. Every decision reinforced a single objective: to preserve the convoy while preparing for the moment when the trap would snap shut. Above, the Arctic clouds thickened, casting the ships in gray shadows that mirrored the tension on board. The Scharnhorst, now visible on the horizon through intermittent snow squalls, began to close the distance, testing the limits of British patience. Burnett's gamble was nearing its climax. Every sailor felt the weight of impending action, knowing that the next hours would decide the fate of men, material, and perhaps the course of the war itself. In this Arctic crucible, strategy was more than planning. It was endurance, nerve, and timing, each intertwined with the human element of courage under extreme conditions. As the first gun crews prepared for the imminent clash, Vice Admiral Burnett reflected on the delicate balance of command. The moment of engagement was approaching, but timing was everything. In the Arctic, where ice and wind could undo even the most meticulous plan, patience was as much a weapon as the guns themselves, and we thought the stage was set for the battle that would become a legendary testament to skill, bravery, and strategic mastery. Would the British trap hold, And would HMS Belfast and the Convoy survive the confrontation? Or was the Scharnhorst about to rewrite the rules of Arctic naval warfare? The Arctic dawn was gray and cold, the sea churning beneath a sky heavy with clouds and drifting snow. HMS Belfast and her sister ships maintained a careful watch, eye scanning for the shadow of the German battleship. After hours of tense maneuvering, the moment had arrived. The trap was ready. Vice Admiral Burnett, standing resolutely on the bridge, felt the weight of responsibility. This was not merely a battle of ships. It was a confrontation of strategy, courage, and sheer endurance, fought in a theater as unforgiving as any in history. At 9:30 a.m., HMS Norfolk fired the first salvo. The shells screamed through the icy air, striking Scharnhorst's main fire control radar and throwing the German ship almost completely blind. The sea erupted around the two fleets as metal met metal, each broadside a deadly statement of intent. Scharnhorst's captain, Eric Bay, attempted to maneuver away, but Burnett anticipated every move, using radar and experience to maintain distance while shadowing the German battleship. The Arctic waters themselves seemed to roar in response, waves slamming against the hulls and spraying ice across decks. Could the British ships maintain control, or would Scharnhorst's superior firepower turn the tide before the trap could be completed? Below decks, heroism took on a quieter, yet equally vital, form. Larry Firstland, a leading stoker aboard HMS Belfast, worked feverishly to prevent the ship's generators from overheating. Steam hissed through the pipes, and coal-fired furnaces strained under the bitter Arctic cold, threatening to cripple the cruiser's power systems. Firstland improvised, redirecting pressure and adjusting fuel distribution, keeping the ship operational under punishing conditions. His actions, like those of countless other sailors, were invisible to the enemy but essential to the survival of the fleet. Every man aboard had a role that could decide the outcome of the day. As the engagement intensified, the running battle became a test of endurance and skill. HMS Sheffield and HMS Norfolk continued to engage, but damage forced them to withdraw temporarily, leaving Belfast alone to maintain contact with Scharnhorst. The German battleship's guns, though impaired, fired relentlessly, and ice-laden shells slammed into the sea, sending geysers of water onto Belfast's decks. The crew's nerves were stretched taut. Every lookout, gunner, and officer knew that a single miscalculation could spell disaster. Could HMS Belfast survive the overwhelming firepower of Scharnhorst, or would this lone cruiser fall victim to the might of the German battleship? Burnett's strategy relied on timing. He knew that HMS Duke of York, the battleship carrying the Royal Navy's most formidable guns, was en route. The idea was to let Scharnhorst exhaust her maneuvers and allow the Duke of York to engage decisively. Yet, in the Arctic, timing was a delicate dance. Snowstorms obscured vision, waves threatened to destabilize targeting, and the cold could disable even the most reliable equipment. Every minute was a gamble. Above the decks, officers shouted orders over the roar of the guns and wind. Gun crews operated with precision, calculating trajectories as waves tossed their platforms. Shells from Belfast found their mark, chipping away at Scharnhorst's defenses. Yet the German battleship continued to fight with formidable determination. The confrontation was as much psychological as physical. The crew's resolve, discipline, and nerves under extreme pressure were being tested every second. With HMS Duke of York still approaching, could the exhausted Belfast maintain its role as the bait and shadow, or would Scharnhorst's firepower overwhelm the cruiser before reinforcements arrived? The German battleship tried repeatedly to disengage, seeking to outmaneuver Belfast and protect her flanks, but Burnett's anticipation proved accurate. Radar-guided movements and disciplined positioning allowed the British to hold Scharnhorst in the kill zone. The Arctic storms, which could have hindered the British, now played an unintentional role, masking the approach of the Duke of York and concealing precise positioning until the final moment. Every maneuver was a blend of strategy and survival instinct, a high-stakes game played in freezing waters where the smallest mistake could be fatal. Below decks, the crew of Belfast endured fatigue, freezing temperatures, and relentless tension. Larry Firstland continued his work, ensuring generators and power systems remained functional despite the ship's pounding. Sailors rotated in shifts, taking turns at the guns, in the engine rooms, and on lookout, all while the thunder of shells and the spray of icy water reminded them that this was not a drill, it was a battle for survival and victory. As the afternoon approached, the decisive moment drew near. HMS Duke of York appeared over the horizon, her massive guns bringing the promise of overwhelming firepower. Scharnhorst, already damaged and increasingly disoriented, faced the full might of the Royal Navy. Burnett's gamble was paying off. The combination of strategy, patience, and bravery was turning the tide. The German battleship, once a predator of the Arctic convoys, was now being hunted. Her movements restricted and her firepower gradually neutralized by superior tactics and coordination. Would the Duke of York's arrival be enough to end Scharnhorst's threat? Or would the German battleship find a last-minute escape that could devastate the convoy and rewrite the course of the battle? Every salvo fired by the British ships chipped away at Scharnhorst's defenses. Hull plates were pierced, secondary guns silenced, and morale among the German crew faltered under relentless pressure. The Arctic waves reflected the flashes of gunfire and the smoke that drifted across the horizon, a grim reminder of the ferocity of naval combat. Belfast's crew remained resolute, knowing that their endurance and skill were critical not just for survival, but for the success of the mission that could decide the fate of the Arctic convoys. And amid the chaos, ordinary acts of courage and ingenuity defined the battle. Sailors like Larry Firstland and countless others, performing their duties with quiet heroism, ensured that HMS Belfast remained operational, ready to continue shadowing the enemy until the decisive moment. Their perseverance under extreme conditions embodied the human dimension of naval warfare, proof that battles were won not only by technology and guns, but by determination, skill, and courage. As Scharnhorst struggled against the coordinated assault, could the Royal Navy capitalize on the moment to deliver a decisive blow, or would the German battleship escape, leaving the Arctic convoys in peril once again? The Battle of North Cape raged across the Arctic waters, a clash of titans where strategy met courage in a deadly dance. The culmination of intelligence, patience, and heroism was now within reach. Yet the final outcome remained uncertain. Every crew member, from officers on the bridge to stokers in the engine rooms, understood that history watched their actions. The Arctic convoys depended on their success, and the fate of men, material, and morale hung in the balance. Click the subscribe button and like the video. Supporting this channel ensures more people learn the remarkable stories of courage and strategy that shaped history. As the first signals of the Duke of York's guns began to thunder in the distance, the stage was set for the final act. Scharnhorst's options were dwindling, her crew exhausted and her systems failing. Yet even now, in the bitter cold and snow, the German battleship fought with tenacity. The final confrontation was at hand, and the Arctic bore witness to one of the most dramatic naval battles of World War II. The Arctic skies were heavy with gray clouds, the sea restless, as HMS Duke of York thundered into position, her massive 14-inch guns ready to engage. Scharnhorst, already weakened from the sustained assault by HMS Belfast and her companions, now faced the full might of the Royal Navy. The tension was almost unbearable aboard both fleets. The final act of the Battle of North Cape was about to unfold. Every sailor understood that the coming hours would decide not just the fate of one ship, but the security of the Arctic convoys and, by extension, the Allied war effort on the Eastern Front. The first salvo from Duke of York tore through the Arctic mist, shells screaming across the water before impacting Scharnhorst's armored hull. The German battleship, already disoriented from prior hits and grappling with impaired radar, could no longer maneuver effectively. Arctic waves rose in frothy walls, hammering every exposed deck, as if nature itself was joining the assault. Crewmen aboard Duke of York and Belfast worked in synchrony, guided by months of training, coordination, and sheer determination. The result was overwhelming firepower concentrated on a single, vulnerable target. Could Scharnhorst withstand this onslaught, or would the Arctic claim one of Germany's most formidable ships in history? The German crew fought valiantly. Officers shouted orders, gunners trained their sights, and engineers struggled to maintain operational systems despite damage and freezing temperatures. But the combination of superior British radar, firepower, and tactical positioning proved decisive. Shell after shell found its mark. Fires spread across Scharnhorst's deck. Secondary armaments were silenced, and critical systems failed one by one. It became clear that the battleship's time was running out. Meanwhile, HMS Belfast continued to provide critical shadowing support, keeping Scharnhorst in position and relaying tactical updates to Duke of York. The Arctic storms raged, waves battering the hulls, yet the British sailors persevered, understanding that the smallest error could reverse months of planning. Every lookout, every gunner, and every officer knew that the fate of the convoy and, potentially, the war effort in the East rested on their actions in these frigid waters. As Scharnhorst limped under fire, would the crew find a final surge of resistance? Or was their fate sealed in the icy expanse? On board Belfast, the crew's courage remained unwavering. Larry Firstland and his fellow sailors continued their tireless work, ensuring that power and operational capability were maintained. Engineers patched damaged systems, gunners recalibrated after every barrage, and officers maintained order despite exhaustion and fear. Their resilience highlighted a critical truth. Victory at sea was not won solely by firepower, but by discipline, endurance, and ingenuity under extreme conditions. By mid-afternoon, the outcome became inevitable. Scharnhorst, once a terrifying predator of the Arctic convoys, was crippled. British guns continued to strike relentlessly, and the German ship began to list, her speed reduced to a crawl. Crews on both sides understood the grim reality. The mighty battleship was sinking. The Arctic waves, cold and merciless, would claim her if the British assault did not deliver the final blow. The final moments of engagement were a testament to human courage and coordination. HMS Duke of York delivered precise and devastating fire, while Belfast's crew ensured the enemy remained within range. The German battleship fought to the last, but the strategic patience and bravery of the Royal Navy could not be denied. Scharnhorst's guns fell silent, her hull breached in multiple places, and she began to succumb to the freezing waters that had challenged every sailor throughout the battle. Would Scharnhorst's destruction finally secure the Arctic convoys, or did the shadows of war promise new threats on the horizon? The sinking of Scharnhorst on December 26, 1943, marked a turning point in Arctic naval warfare. With one of Germany's most formidable surface ships eliminated, the threat to Allied convoys diminished dramatically. Supplies continued to flow to the Soviet Union, strengthening their war effort against the Axis powers. The Royal Navy's victory demonstrated how intelligence, strategy, and courage under extreme conditions could triumph over even the most dangerous adversaries. Vice Admiral Burnett's gamble had paid off. His decision to wait, to allow Scharnhorst to be drawn into the trap, showcased the value of patience and strategic foresight. Captain Frederick Parham's guidance, the crew's precise execution, and acts of individual heroism, like those of Larry Firstland, collectively ensured a decisive outcome. This battle highlighted that success in war often hinges on both small acts of courage and meticulous strategic planning carried out under the harshest conditions imaginable. Though the Battle of North Cape was won, the Arctic convoys continued their perilous journey. Another storm, another German patrol, another battle could loom at any moment, testimony that courage and vigilance would always be required on these icy seas. The aftermath of Scharnhorst's sinking echoed through the corridors of the Admiralty. Reports of heroism, strategy, and precision were circulated, setting examples for future naval operations. The Arctic, once seen as a deadly, uncontrollable frontier, became a theater where calculated risk, intelligence, and human resilience could prevail. The men of HMS Belfast, HMS Duke of York, and other supporting vessels had not only protected the convoy, but it also reshaped the balance of power in the North Atlantic and Arctic waters. The Battle of North Cape became more than a victory. It became a symbol of courage and skill, showing that even in the harshest conditions, discipline and strategy could overcome fearsome odds. Every sailor who endured the cold, every officer who made life-and-death decisions, and every crew member who performed their duty with precision contributed to a story that would be remembered as one of the most remarkable naval engagements of the Second World War. The Arctic convoys pressed on, carrying vital supplies to the Soviet front. Yet, the war was far from over, and the courage of men like Burnett Parham and Firstland would be tested again in the frozen waters of the North. The story of strategy, bravery, and endurance in the Arctic was only a chapter in a larger war, a reminder that history is shaped as much by human courage as by steel and fire.